All right.
Hey,
Well, oh, sorry. I'll intro you, Kirsten. Thanks for joining us, guys. We're super excited to have you here. I'm Steven. I'm sure that you guys know this already, but if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat. And if I can't answer them, I will relay them over to Kirsten and we will answer them as soon as possible. So yeah, you guys know what we're doing here already. This is our Peppermint Merry and Bright decorative sign. We are super happy to have you guys here with us. Oh, I got Kirsten holding it up for you right there. Love it. Yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to let Kirsten get started.
okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Stephen. So again, we're excited for you guys to be here in our class today with Michael's. And we are making this really gigantic, really adorable Christmas peppermint sign that you could use as a wreath. You could use it over your mantle. It's just such a really great piece for Christmas. So let me show you guys first what you need, what supplies you need. So the first and most important thing is this large round wood shape available at Michael's. So that is already got the ribbon on it, or the hanging ribbon. So you need that large shape. And then also on the supply list, we put these really cute chunky wood letters. And we are just spelling out merry and bright. I know a lot of you, I always love this in a class when you guys kind of go with your own creative path, and maybe you're spelling out your last name, or maybe you got different letters to spell something, maybe personalize it or make it as a gift. But just so you know, we're using these chunky wood letters from Michael's, and we are spelling out merry and bright, and then we have this ampersand. So those are the wood letters that you'll need. And then we're only using 3 colors of paint today, but something that's really exciting. We're using a paint. Normally when I teach, I just use normal traditional FolkArt acrylic. We are using FolkArt Glossy, which is just a fabulous acrylic paint, but it has a really, really high gloss finish when you're done. So we are using 2 glossy colors. We are using Radiant Red and Honeysuckle. And then we're using a traditional FolkArt acrylic, mainly for our base coat. And this is just titanium white. So only those 3 colors. On the supply list that we included for this class is a brush set that just has larger and smaller flat brushes. And what I always like to tell people for a really simple project like this is use whatever brush you're most comfortable with. We're using flat, more base coat type brushes, and just a medium and a small. Again, if you like to use a really big one, have that. But if not, just a basic base coating brush. We're going to need some scissors. We are going to need stencil, paint, any type of masking tape. And then we're going to need white yarn. And again, if you want to do red and pink yarn, if you want to do black pom-poms at the end, but we are going to make these cute little pom-poms. Let me show you that just kind of accent the whimsy look and feel of this really cute sign. Okay, so with that, always our basic supplies: water to clean your brushes, paper towels, and a palette, whether you use a ceramic plate or a plastic plate or palette paper, but somewhere to squeeze out your paint. So also, if any of you have ever joined me on a class, one thing I always have handy is a blow dryer. The main reason for that is we want you guys to learn so many wonderful techniques in just an hour. So I'll cheat and kind of speed up the dry time. So you'll need a blow dryer if you're going to go along, but don't forget, this will be recorded and you can access it anytime after tomorrow. And then a hot glue gun. And again, hot glue gun is my favorite glue to use, but if you prefer tacky glue or wood glue, whatever glue to finish it up at the end. Okay, so those are the supplies that we are going to need. Any questions about our supplies, Stephen, before I get started on this?
No, I think that we are good, but yeah, if you guys need to reference them back, I'm sure we will post it in the chat in just a second. So yeah.
Correct. Okay, so really the first thing in every project is really the boring part. And all we are going to do is we are going to base coat our large circle with the FolkArt traditional acrylic. So I'm just going to shake that up a little bit to make sure it is perfect. And actually, whenever I'm base coating a really large surface like this, I don't even use palette paper or a paper towel. I just squeeze it out onto my project. There's no reason to go from plate to surface when you're doing a solid base coat. You can see how rich and creamy that FolkArt acrylic paint is. We will be able to base coat this with just one coat. Goes beautifully on this wood surface from Michaels. And I am using a 3/4 inch flat brush. But again, you can use a larger brush, you can use a little bit smaller brush, whatever you're comfortable with when you're base coating. They always tease me here in the studio that I always seem to use a smaller brush than they would. And they're not wrong. And I'm not sure why, but I do like to work with a little bit smaller brush. You can see how quickly and beautifully that base coats. And what I always do is I leave a little section on the top. You can see the bottom right here. I'm not going to paint that yet because I'm going to use that as a handle. Make sure you guys can see it. I'm just going to use that as a spot to hold while I base coat the edges. We always say what you do to the top, do to the side so that your project looks perfect and complete. Make sure you don't have any built up areas of paint where it's thicker or not even, because that will just take a little bit longer for everything to dry. Oh, I'm just smoothing it out so it's a nice even finish. Michaels has so many great holiday shapes that you can do so much cute home decor for Christmas. I'm just making sure that is nice and even. And then now that the sides are done, I'm going to lay that back down flat and just add a little bit more white and finish base coating that. Real simple way to base coat with these beautiful shapes that are already smooth. They don't require any prep, any sanding. They're just perfect for these kinds of projects. Okay, so I've got a really even base coat on my large circle. The edges match the top. No areas where the paint is puddled or built up. That way it will just dry really fast. Okay, I'm going to scoot that over to the side and just let that dry for a minute. And while that is drying, we can start base coating our chunky wood letters. So I'm just going to lay those out and make sure they're all face up. There's no need to base coat the back. So I'm only going to base coat the front of each one. So I'm just going to lay those out. They have little staples in the back. Make sure that you guys, before we glue them on, you can paint them now with me, but make sure you remove those little staples where they had hang tags on them at the store, just because you won't get, the glue will not attach it as perfect. If those staples are still on there, they'll just be a little bit uneven. And so you don't want that. So I've already removed my little staples from the hang tags. If you haven't, you can do that. But if not, just make sure you do it before we glue anything on. Okay, so now I'm going to be using the glossy. And this is, again, a high shine, dries with a super glossy finish, but it's really just a basic acrylic. So anything that you do with a traditional acrylic, you can do with this glossy paint. I'm going to put that right there on my palette paper. And what I like to do is paint the edges first. And we're just base coating these solid. So however you like to base coat, whether it be the top, whether you're going to do a different color, Some of you might be doing maybe a home decor color that matches your home decor, like green or like a really pretty blue. These letters would also be really pretty in maybe a black on the peppermint candy. Always personalize it and make it what matches your home decor. But I always like to keep the top unpainted so I can hold it and move it around and get all of those edges. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush, and it's just the perfect size to get into all of those deep edges. I love this honeysuckle pink. We've all been saying since this line of glossy paint came out that this is really a perfect pink. It's got a little feel of coral, but it's just such a beautiful color. I think we've all agreed it's one of our favorite. I'm actually going to do the edges only of a couple of them. That way the edges are kind of drying, and then I'll put a really smooth, perfect coat on the top. But all we are doing, guys, is simply base coating our wood letters. You can see this glossy, FolkArt Glossy, also is so rich and creamy, and it will go on with just one coat. I love these letters. They would stand up on their own. I think that is such a cute thing, because you could use them on your mantle, or you could almost do like a different alphabet that you change out and do a different word or phrase throughout the year. But I love that they could also stand. So I'm just painting those edges, but you can see the coverage is just beautiful. We're only going to need one coat. I'm going to do a few more, and then we're going to check on our large circle and see if that white is dry enough to keep going. What I want you guys to do is always learn all of the techniques, all of the steps. Maybe you have to go back and base coat a few more letters after the class, but you have all of the techniques, and we haven't ran out of time, so that it's easy for you guys to always complete this project in just about an hour. Everyone's quiet as a mouse and just base coating. I know it.
Kirsten, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is this the primer, or is this the only coat that we're going to do today?
Nope, this is not the primer. We are base coating and painting all at the same time, because again, this glossy FolkArt acrylic works as both. There is no need to prime the surface at all. So we are just applying a really nice, smooth, even coat. I'm just going to show you. So the first three, I did the edges, a little bit sloppy, but covered completely. The top is a little bit sloppy, but then I always save the top for last. And I go on there and just do a really smooth, even, solid coat. And you can see on this M that you get full coverage. Make sure you guys can see it. You get full coverage, and you just get a really vibrant color with just one coat. This unfinished wood is so easy to paint. There's no need to prep or sand or anything. You just want to make sure you don't have any, big areas where maybe the paint is dripping off the top into maybe one of the details. You just want to make sure everything is really even and smooth. I just keep adding paint to my palette as you need it. Okay, I think I'm just going to do these three. because again, most importantly is I want you guys to learn all of the techniques, little tips. But you guys can see, the main thing I wanted you to see is, and again, some of you have been crafting for years and years. Some of you, maybe there's kids crafting with us today, but just little techniques that we kind of learn over time here in the content studio. And that is painting the edge is just an easier way to grip a little chunky shape like this. And then you paint the top, the part that shows the most at the very end with just a really smooth coat. Okay, so only because of time, I'm going to see how my shape is. It's a little bit wet, but what we're going to do, we're going to kind of move, and I apologize for that. We're going to kind of move back and forth between the letters and the shape. Again, just so you guys can learn everything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get our large base coated circle back, and I'm going to hit that with a blow dryer just so that it dries quick. It's almost dry to the touch, which is one of the reasons I love working with FolkArt acrylic. It's almost dry to the touch, but I want it to be completely dry, especially because we're using tape today. So Stephen, any questions before I make a bunch of noise with the blow dryer?
I think you are good to go. We're caught up at the moment.
All right, then I'm going to hit this with the blow dryer. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I am going to go back and do a second coat with the white. I'm going to shake that up, make sure it's mixed perfectly. You just want to have a really even, solid base coat. Okay, again, I'm going to squirt that directly onto my project. I'm going to get that large flat brush. It's the same one that we used before. And just a little tip, whenever you're using acrylic, don't have a super wet brush. You don't want to have a lot of water in your brush, mainly because all that does is thins the paint. So you want to dry your brush every time on a paper towel. So I'm just doing a second coat of that regular FolkArt acrylic white. And I am using a 3/4 inch flat brush. We had really good coverage, but because this is such a bold, whimsy look, we just want a really nice solid white. My edges are solid, so I'm not going to paint those a second time. I'm just going to do this top. So we have a really clean, color blocked look when we start doing our peppermint. Just adding paint as I need it directly onto my surface. And you can see these 2 coats is all that we are going to need. Okay. Make sure it's even. Go over any areas where the paint is a little bit thicker or built up. And now that that is even, I am going to hit it one more time with the blow dryer so it's completely dry. I'm back. Stephen, it felt like I actually timed it in the corner of my eye. It felt like it took 45 minutes, but it was only 3 minutes.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So you have a perfectly dry, and really, you guys, the main reason why I'm pushing for using the blow dryer or kind of pausing and going back for this step after your project is dried is whenever you're using, whether it's masking tape or painter's tape, you just want your project to be completely dry. Because if you put tape on a project that's even the littlest bit wet, I don't want you to have any pulling up of your base coat. Okay, so with that said, you should have a large white circle, totally dry, making sure, double checking. Again, smooth though, doesn't need to be sanded. And then your letters are just over there. Some are base coated, maybe some of you are faster than me, but those will continue to base coat in a minute. What I want to do, and I think this is too big to get both on the screen at the same time, but I just want to give you guys some little tips about doing something that usually would require a bunch of measuring. I am not a measurer. I don't like doing anything precise. I want a really whimsy, loose look without measuring each section and making it something that is not enjoyable. So what I like to do is this little string is the perfect way to mark the top. So put that at the top of your work area. And then I'm going to just take one piece of tape that is the length of my project. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball that. Get a cleaner edge. I'm just going to kind of eyeball that from the center of my little hang up loop down to the bottom. I never press the tape down because there's just no need to. And then what I'm going to do, so I have tape from the top to the bottom. I am just going to lightly pull that back. And by going back, so it goes all the way down from top to bottom, but then I'm just releasing the bottom and bringing it to the top. So I've split my tape in half. So that is marking the center of my project. Does that make sense? I did a whole piece of tape and then I just pulled it back until that end went to the top of my sign. And then that is the center of my large candy. And then I'm going to actually pull that same piece of tape off, and knowing that that's my center, I'm just going to eyeball again, left to right. But knowing that that's my center. So going the other way. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull one side back until that end gets to the other side. And then I am going to mark that. And then where those two lines meet, I'm just doing a tiny little X to represent the center. Does that make sense? It's just an easy, loose, whimsical way of finding the center on a project like this. And then now what I'm doing is I'm taking that piece of tape and just lightly pressing it down. You don't have to go crazy and mash it down. Lightly pressing that down below the center. So the center is right there where my finger is. I'm putting my tape line at the bottom of the center. Does that make sense? Not over the center, but at the bottom of that center line. Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Hates geometry as much as I do. That's why I'm repeating myself, but just a real simple line at the bottom of my X. So what we are going to do is we are going to just focus on the top of our circle. So I'm going to rip a piece of tape and I'm going to put that on the X, so on the center, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to go maybe to there. So that will be my first candy slice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sneak a little piece of yarn. This is going to work as our little measurer. And I'm just going to cut just a little scrap piece of yarn. And what I'm going to do is just kind of mark from there to there. And I'm going to cut that piece of yarn. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm not going in a circle like the edge of my project. I'm just going on the end and pulling that string from tape to tape. Does that make sense? Just a little cheap piece of yarn. Okay, so then I'm going to push down that tape, really just focusing on the edge that I'm going to be painting. And I am going to be using the red FolkArt Glossy. And there again, I'm squeezing it out onto my project, really just because we're painting something so large. And look at that coverage. It is absolutely beautiful. Now, one thing I like to tell people when they're painting on tape is I don't like to drag and pull into the tape, because if there's a spot that's not pressed down as much, you're more likely to get tape or get paint up under your tape. So instead of painting towards your tape, I always tell people to paint off the tape. So you start on the tape and pull onto your project. You're just more likely to get a perfect crisp edge than if you're painting towards the tape. Does that make sense? You're just pulling your brush from the tape onto your project. But you can see that red is such a beautiful color. And all we're doing is simply base coating this first little piece of peppermint, first little stripe on the peppermint. I'm going to add paint actually to that little area as I need it. And just filling that in with a solid base coat. So the only tips there, I just love to share all the little tips that I've learned over the years working with so many talented people down here. Okay, so then I'm going to leave this long piece of tape on there, and I'm only going to pull off this first one. And you can see you get such a beautiful crisp line. And this is something that you can do, or you don't have to do. I always reuse my tape. So I'll take this little piece of tape and I will just tape it over here on the edge of my desk to use later. Okay, so then we've got our little cheap piece of yarn. That was the width of that one. I am just going to lay that right there. And I'm going to rip a second piece of tape. And I am going to tape on the white section. So that's my red stripe. This is my white one. So I can see the width that that little piece needs to be. I'm applying my tape, finding that little center. I'm not going to press down there at all because there's the red. So the white and the blue is that width of my little measuring piece of yarn. So all of that will stay white. Then I'm going to move that little piece of yarn over to here. I'm going to reuse that piece of tape. I'm going to find my center. And I'm going to press that tape down. So that will be my piece, my second stripe in the red. Does that make sense? I'm just using this little yarn that I've measured on my first stripe to determine the distance for the white one, and then to determine the distance for my second red stripe. And then I'm going to just repeat that all the way around, putting the glossy FolkArt red directly on my project, pressing down that tape, but really not overdoing it, and starting on the tape and pulling onto the project rather than painting towards the tape. Same with the edge. If you paint towards the edge, you get a really clean edge. And if you come this way, you just have more potential to have drips on the edge of your project. How's my geometry lesson going, Stephen?
It's going good. I don't know if this would have helped me in geometry class at all, but I'd say you're doing great so far.
We didn't have little cheap pieces of string in geometry, did we?
That's right.
But just solid coverage directly over the tape. And then I'm going to remove that tape. And again, you get such a beautiful crisp line. I'm actually going to remove this one as well. But you can see just using that string, they're not perfect. I'm sure someone's going to measure them and they're a little bit off, but you get that really bold, whimsy, geometric pattern just by using that little piece of string to measure. So same thing here, using that little piece of string to mark where the white piece will be. I'm always meeting in the middle on that little X that we created. Whoops. So that the blue under the blue tape all the way is the white. And then that will be the red, reusing, finding my center, pressing that down. A little bit of red on there, but that's okay because that's going to be red anyway. Putting red directly on my project and then starting on the tape, just like we did on all the other little peppermint stripes. And painting towards the edge. Whether it's a frame or a box or a giant wood letter, whatever you're painting, all of these tips would apply. You can see how this paint dry as it's drying on this side, it dries that beautiful glossy finish. So just pulling up that last candy stripe. But see how beautiful and crisp that edge is? You got a little spot there where I added tape. That's okay. I don't need to add tape to touch that up. I'm just going to brush that on. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to let this dry. So I'm not going to remove this piece yet, but you can see I just have alternating candy stripes. So what I'm going to do is I am going to set that to the side, and we can do one of two things. Maybe what we'll do is we'll base coat some more of our letters, at least Mary, so that we can glue that on at the end. And then we will make some pom-poms, and I'll just show you how to do the finishing touches at the very end. Okay, so I am going to clean that brush in water. And just like I said, always clean your brush in water, but always remove as much of the water as you can on a dry paper towel. So using the same honeysuckle pink, I'm just going to finish up the R and the Y and get a good base coat on those. And this is using a 1/2 inch flat brush. Okay, it's moving them around a little bit messy, but the acrylic paint washes right off with soap and water. I'm going to do the edge of the Y. And just doing the edges. I'm not painting the back. There's no need at all to paint the back. Okay, there's the little Y. I'm gonna lay those down, and always I do the top coat last, or the top of the letter, not the top coat. So it's perfect and smooth. And then finish up that little R. Those letters are so cute. I love that they're so thick. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry, and we're gonna go back and forth again, just so you guys can learn all of the techniques. Okay, so while everything's kind of drying, my letters are drying, the top of my peppermint is drying, I want to show you guys kind of a simple technique. Most of you have probably been making pom-poms forever, and there's so many different ways to make pom-poms. So these little guys are just cute and whimsy and accent the top of the sign. So I'm going to use white. You can use white, red, black. Something that's really cute when making pom-poms is using different colors of yarn and just doing the same technique that we're learning, but doing a little bit of red, a little bit of pink, and a little bit of white. And then you get those pom-poms that are just almost like speckled patches of color, and they're really fun and whimsy. So again, Michael's has tons of different pom-pom making tools, but what I like to do when I'm just doing something really quick and whimsy to accent a project is I take the end of the yarn and I just hold that in my fingers, and I don't want to squeeze tight so I can't get it off. So I kind of separate my fingers a little bit, but then I just start wrapping. Oh, unroll that. Got a little knot. Hang on. There we go. But see, I got a little space between my fingers, so it's not really tight, but I just keep wrapping until you get a really thick, the more you wrap, the thicker and fuller your pom-pom is. But you keep your fingers separated just a little bit so you can get it off of there easily. So you can secure the center. And all I'm doing is wrapping that again and again and again, creating a really thick gathering of yarn. And if you were alternating colors, I would do this much white, and then maybe you could do this much black, or maybe half in black or half in pink, but you would just wrap the colors one on top of the other, and you would get a pom-pom that was just really unique in a lot of different colors. But we're just doing solid white. A lot of people cut cardboard in the width that they want their pom-pom to be. A lot of people use something they have around the home. Maybe it's the end of a spatula, or even a credit card would work. But I just always have found it really easy to just wrap it around my fingers. All right, so that's probably thick enough. And what I'm going to do is just cut the end, and then very carefully take that off of my fingers. But you want that to stay in that shape. You don't want that to come unraveled. And then I'm going to cut a long piece of yarn, and I'm going to lay that gathering. My fingers were in there like that, so solid loops, solid loops. So you're going to lay that long piece of string on the center and just tie that really tight in the middle, as tight as you can get it. I always pull it really tight, then stick my finger in there and keep my finger on that center. Right until the end. So you just want that center knot as tight as it can be. And then I hold those two strings that we use to tie the center. And then you see you've got the different loops. Again, your fingers were in there that way. So you've got solid loops on that side and that side. And then all I do is go into the center and cut those loops into pieces. So you're just separating the loop and creating strips. Make sure you get them all. Oh, there's one. And then I flip that over, still holding on to that long piece and cutting those loops into individual little strips, just making sure that you get them all. And then what I do is always holding on to that long piece. I just kind of fluff it, and then you just have to trim it. So you can see some are longer and some are shorter. That's how it came together when you tied it in the center. So then what I do, always holding on to that long piece, I just kind of fluff it, make sure I don't have any loops in there. Oh, there's one. And then you just give it a little haircut. You just cut, moving it back and forth until all the long pieces are a little bit shorter, and it just kind of fills out and is nice and even. You can keep it long, you can cut it shorter. Oh, there's some more loops that were never cut. That's okay. I'm just going to trim those. Shake it and check on it every now and then. I think a pom-pom makes every project cuter, especially something cute and whimsy like this peppermint sign. So I just keep fluffing it, seeing any ones that are long, and just keep trimming it until it is the perfect shape and size. There we go. It would be so cute if you had chose to use this peppermint maybe on your door for Christmas. You could even add pom-poms to your garland. You could add it to your mantle. Be so cute. Even add it to the little string that hangs up your stockings. You could make pom-poms and use those for your decor. And then you have got a perfect little pom-pom. And you just trim it. Oh, there's one that's kind of long. You just keep trimming it until it is the perfect size for your project. I'll throw all of that away. Okay, so the technique, and again, this is what I love about these classes, is they're filled with so many techniques. So base coating, making sure your edges are perfect, how to make a really simple pom-pom without any extra tools other than scissors. That's part of the technique. And then this being the most important, I want to make sure that you guys know how to finish up your peppermint. Okay, so let's see. Our red is still a little bit wet. I'm going to hit that with the blow dryer. Okay, so Stephen, I know I'm moving back and forth on this particular project. Are there any questions? How are we doing?
No, I think we're good. I think everybody's just enjoying following along.
Oh, good. Awesome. Okay, so you guys, the main thing about switching from the top to the bottom that I want to show you guys is, so you can see right here, the red touches the tape and the white, it was part of our base coat. So what we're going to do is we are going to remove this center piece of tape. And what you're going to do the bottom half of your candy sign is you're going to use all of these lines from above as a guide. So for example, this line right here, that's the edge. Can you guys see? Yep. This line right here, what you are going to do, you're not going to stick it down because it's still a little bit wet, but you're going to place it over that just as a guide, but then you're going to actually press down. Whoops. you're going to press down just the bottom half. Does that make sense? So you're going to only press down. You're using this line as a guide. Does that make sense? And then you're going to press down your tape, and you can actually rip off the top. And you would use that as a guide to create the bottom to look exactly like the top. And then you would have this beautiful, consistent peppermint piece, because by using the top as a guide, your pieces are going to line up and your shape is going to be consistent. So for example, like right here, I would take this, whoops, too much tape, it's all sticking together. I would use this line right here as a guide, and I would lay that on top, but I'm not pressing it down because the red is still wet, but I'm just allowing it to guide me. Does that make sense? I'm allowing it to guide me for this side. So I'm going to press it down right there, but then I'm going to rip it right here because there's no need to have it over there. So then this, I would paint red. Does that make sense? So you're using that as a guide for this piece of tape, and you're using that line as a guide for this piece of tape. So this little section of my peppermint would be red. And then I would just continue moving all the way around, using this as a guide for this piece, using this as a guide for this piece, and then it will just be consistent, and you will have a complete little peppermint patty all the way around your sign. I want to make sure you guys can see it because it's such a big project. Okay, so what you guys will do, and you'll actually do that kind of at home or at your own pace. That's why, again, what we did, what Stephen and I were saying is we wanted to make sure that you guys had all of the techniques, and that also that you know for sure that you can go on to michaels.com at any time and rewatch all of these classes. You can pause them and you can go at your own pace, letting your tape, because the key is when you use any type of tape is using it on dry paint, and then that would be completed. You would get a beautiful peppermint background for your words. And then all you'll do to place your words is you will lay those on your dry base coated sign, and then you will glue those down. Again, I love to use hot glue, but you could use tacky glue, you could use super glue, you could use wood glue, but you would assemble your beautiful chunky wood letters right over your peppermint sign. And then at the end, just to add that little fun whimsy touch, we learned how to make pom-poms, and you will just tie that directly to that little jute ribbon on top. That will accent it. And you have the most perfect peppermint sign to hang up for the holiday season. So that is our project for today. Stephen, do we have any questions before we're done?
No questions. I think we're good.
That's awesome. So you guys, thanks for joining us. Please share your projects. We love to see what you guys have done. And that is #PlaidCrafts and #MakeItAtMichaels. And we'd love to see your projects. And then we will see you next time on our Michaels classes. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.